Today, I've got 5 tips to help you improve your virtual golf game in PGA Tour 2K23. Let's dive on in. So I've got the practice facility loaded up, which is going to be the perfect place to run through the first few of these tips. If you're interested in making one of these for yourself, I'll leave a link to it down in the description below. But without further ado, tip number 1. Wind and elevation math. You've got to know it. You absolutely need to know where your ball is going to go, how far it is going to travel, because these courses aren't flat. Now, the first of these that we have to tackle is elevation, because wind may or may not be at play, but if there's elevation change, that is going to be the first place that you need to start with. So, first thing that we're going to do here on our practice facility is we are going to give a little example by raising the ground. We're going to do, say, 30 feet just to show exactly how this all works. So if we raise 30 feet here, this is a good example because it's a pretty decent chunk of elevation change. And it's enough to show how there are some differences between clubs. So we're 30 feet up here, and we've got a few things going on right out the gate. So when practicing, having assists on is perfectly reasonable. You want to see exactly what the changes are going to be. You want to turn on a setting in your HUD. That way you will always see the elevation change up in the corner the same way that I have it now. So you want to go into your settings, over to display in HUD, and then you're going to scroll down a bit and you're going to get to distance info position. Switch that to in HUD and you will always see elevation change up in the corner of your screen regardless of the difficulty setting. So it's really, really nice if you get up into some of the harder difficulties that take away aim marker and you're not going to have some of the help right on the screen. You still have that. That is step number 1. Now, from there, we can take a look at something else. Now we've got 30 foot, and you can see that we've got a flat surface out here. It is 30 feet all the way across. The general rule of thumb with elevation change is every 3 feet of elevation change, add or subtract a yard from your shot. So if my lob wedge goes 111 yards, and I'm downhill 30 feet, that would be 121 yards. Simple, right? Now, the only caveat to this is wedges play slightly less because it is less distance, less time for it to have an effect. So, if we go into our settings yet again, but this time we go to difficulty, we can actually make use of some of the aids to be able to look at the end result here pretty swiftly. So you can see that it's actually 119 yards, which, like I said, wedges play a little bit shorter, but as we go out, we go from 8 yards extra to 9 yards extra, 9 yards, and now we're at 10. And we're kind of, sometimes you'll see 9, it's some rounding stuff because your yardages are not truly, it's not 165 exactly, it might be 164.9 or 165.2. But as a very close estimate, we are getting then an extra 10 yards as we go through here. The same can be stated for when you have an uphill lie, except instead of adding yards to your carry, you would be subtracting yards to your carry. So that will help you to not come up short and also to not end up way long on some of the extreme downhills that you might see in the game. Now, moving on to the other half of this tip, which is wind. Wind is something that is a little more complex, as wind can be a straight headwind, it can be a straight tailwind, or it can be any other point in the circle. But same way we have general rules of thumb with the elevation changes, we have general rules of thumb with wind. Again, wedges, because they are shorter, are going to play slightly less. Hybrid, driver, wood, those are all going to play slightly more because ball is just in the air longer, more time for the wind to have an effect. So, what is the general rule of thumb? Well, when you have a headwind, it is going to be roughly 1.2, 1.25 times the wind that you get in your face. So here, again, we have a 10-mile-an-hour wind, and we can go in and utilize our difficulty settings to our advantage. So we see that it's 10 miles an hour. Well, I can turn on the provision of wind, and I can take a look at what exact effect that's going to have. Little caveat here when playing around, winds can change. So I looked at it at 10. It may have changed ever so slightly in the time that I looked away. But for all intents and purposes, is a 10-mile-an-hour wind. So you can see it's 11 in our face here is how much we'd be losing with this wind. So 10 times 1.25 would be 12.5. You can see that it's 11. We're looking at a lob wedge, so that makes sense. Now, if we go out to something like our 8-iron, we've got 12 yards off. We go out to something like our hybrid, well, now we're at 13. So you can see that this general rule of thumb is pretty good. Now, if you have a tailwind, the same can be said, except it's going to play around 1 mile to 1 yard. So tailwinds are pretty easy to get right, 1-to-1, wedges shorter. And then once you start getting into your side winds, that's where things get a little more complicated. Tailwinds, you can kind of just start at the 1-to-1, and as it tapers, it's going to start falling off slower because it was 1-to-1, right? Headwinds being 1.25, there's going to be a bigger ramp down to get to 0, which is that side to side. The extra caveat to this is different wind categories. So you have low wind, medium wind, high, very high. As you start to climb up into the high and very high winds, those multipliers get just a little bit more. So if you see a high or very high wind, it is perfectly okay to err on the side of around 1.4 to 1.5 times. And even into very highs, I believe very highs can go upwards of like 1.6 or 1.7. If you're playing in like the crazy like 18 mile an hour, 25 mile an hour, you could play a 20 mile an hour headwind and your ball may come up 35 yards shorter than you thought it would. So now that tip number 1 is out of the way, and I know that was a very big tip, so maybe like 2 tips in one, we're on to tip number 2, which is understanding the yardage effect that loft and spin have on your shot. Loft and spin can be a very, very, very useful tactic in order to approach certain pins. If you want to do a lot of spin, if you want to get that spin on your shot, you want to see your ball rip back with a wedge, full loft, full backspin is going to be step number 1 to getting that to happen. Faster greens, more slope on the green, you can really use that to your advantage. But that's just the fun part of it, right? That's just the fun part of it, watching your ball come ripping back. But there's more to it than that. Each and every club is going to be affected by loft and spin a little bit differently. Something like a wedge is going to be able to really loft it to take yardage off. You can see that we started 111 yards, but if I fully loft it, mine comes back to 93 yards. Now, you're going to have to mess with your own clubs because these are shot stats that are affected by your shaping. I play with the Sculptor, so I have a lot of shaping on my clubs. I'm able to really manipulate my distances using shot shaping. A big takeaway here is that when you are lofting and delofting and spinning your clubs, the shorter the club, pretty much the less distance effect that spin is going to have. But as you start to climb up, you can see that, oh, well, that's weird. When I add a lot of spin, I'm actually starting to gain a little bit of yardage as I go into my irons. Well, wouldn't you know that that's actually the case once you get out of your wedges, especially with high shaping capabilities. If you have lesser shaping, there might be a little bit more yardage loss before yardage gain. But one thing that people run into very frequently is they put backspin on a shot, especially higher up in their bag, and all of a sudden, why did my ball carry so far? I don't understand. Well, look at this. my driver, if I put full backspin on it, goes from 302 yards to 316 yards. That's 14 yards of carry. So do not make that mistake. Understand how your shot shaping affects your shot. Similarly, on some of these longer clubs, 3-wood, pretty much on your woods and your driver, even loft is going to add distance. So you've got to be very careful. Take the time to learn your clubs. It will save you strokes. Now, tip number 3, it's a bit of a shorter one, so save you guys some time here. Create good club gaps and hit 100% shots. Piggybacking off of the last tip, now that you've got your understanding of how loft is affecting your shots, well, I personally like to hit 100% shots, because when you're hitting 100% shots, you are giving yourself the best chance to be consistent across your entire bag. Now, if you're playing 75% here and 90% here and 100% here, and then you're playing, 75% again, you're going to cause yourself to not get into a great rhythm for your swing plane and tempo. You want to take as many variables out of your golf swing as possible. So by doing this, you're just going to get into that rhythm better. You're going to really understand how each and every club works because you're always playing at 100%, and then you can shot shape, right? Once you start partialing, you can do it, but if you're struggling, take variables out, hit 100% shots. Now, if you're doing this, if you're using shot shaping, then, lofting and de-lofting to fill your gaps instead of hitting partial shots, then having good club gaps is really effective. So I know that I can cover from 111 to 125 yards, no problem, right? I can get down to 108 if I want, full loft. 139, oh, look at that. I can get down 4 yards below. Wedges, I like to play a little bit more spaced out because I can loft them more and have some really good control on it. So you can see here I got 14 yards, 14 yards, 14 yards again. And then we go up 12. Now we're running irons. Irons, you can kind of get away with playing in that 10 to 12, 10 to 15 kind of ballpark. I really like 10 to 11. That's a real nice sweet spot. That way, I can, if I need to, loft it way down and get past, but there's a little bit of cushion. And then I play all of my gap at the top. So play distance at the top and then nice club gaps down at the bottom. And I assure you that will help. We've gone from tee to green, and now we're on to tip number 4, which brings us to the putting surface. Do not be afraid to use Putt Preview as a tool for learning. A lot of people will use Putt Preview and just help them make their putt and move on. Well, that's it. Which is fine, to each their own. But if you are playing, say, just playing local matches, trying to get better, right? You're not competing with anybody. You're not playing society. You're just trying to improve. And maybe you're focusing on putting that day, or you're focusing on a lot of things and putting when you get to the green. Putt Preview can help immensely. Now, what I will recommend is, well, first off, turn on Putt Preview. So go into your difficulty settings, scroll on down to Putt Preview. Turn them all on. Take as many as you'd like. Now, what you want to first do is read your putt, right? So we see that it's pretty straight here. We've got some break from left to right. It's breaking through, and then it kind of flattens out. Still a little bit going at the end. Now, what you want to do here is visualize the line that you are seeing and trying to hit in your head, right? Now, use Putt Preview and watch how the putt breaks. But what I want you to do is figure out where in the putt that you visualized in your mind that it broke down, right? Don't just go, oh, well, I missed it low, so I need to aim to the left. That's all fine and dandy, but break it down more. So for me, looking at this here, I can see that, okay, I'm on line at the start, but in I like to break it down into thirds. So in the first third, it started pretty much on the line that I thought that it would. But where things started to fall apart for me is in the middle third, and then into the end. So the end, I think, is kind of on line with what I would have thought, but the middle has turned me even more. So it doesn't matter what I thought at the end. I was already on a line low of the hole. So now I can take this knowledge and really start to understand, okay, I'm understanding this part of my putt read correctly, but maybe I'm wrong here. And over time, seeing the line, getting that extra side of the line, and trying to correct yourself, it just gives you an extra chance to learn. Which brings me to tip number 5, and that is try and understand the why. Always be learning, always be trying to learn. Whether it be on the green or on your way to the green, you want to understand, why did this happen? If you miss a putt, where did I misread it? Was it the pace? Was it the line? On your full shots, you know, okay, you think, okay, you got your yardage that you calculated. Did you mishit a tempo? Did you miss your swing plane? If you got those things right, and you still got your yardage wrong, okay, did I misread the elevation? Did I misread the wind? You know, you can get really in depth, and you can get into some things with, you know, how was the lie at my feet? Things really play off of each other, but the more that you can learn and understand, I promise, the better off you will be. Now, if these tips helped you, please consider liking and subscribing. That way you don't miss out on any more PGA Tour 2K23 videos. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.